I have just turned 4.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Today, I'd like to welcome you to today's call. And Sherry, you want to give us the COVID numbers and the vaccine numbers for this week?
Sure. Here are the latest COVID numbers. As of yesterday, Assisted Living Communities has 60 positive residents, down 28 from our last update, while nursing homes had 218 positive residents, down by 52. Assisted Living Communities had 77 positive staff, down 15 from last week, while nursing homes had 197 positive staff, up by 15. Next slide, we have the COVID data tracker, the COVID vaccinations for long-term care in Florida. As of yesterday, the total doses administered were 395,077. That's 288 more than we reported this time last week. And people in long-term care with 1+ doses was at 237,518. And those with 2+ doses was at 154,601.
Wow, thank you, Sherry. We appreciate that. We apologize that AHCA is not able to be on the call today. Last Friday, Molly McKinstry, who's the Deputy of Health Quality Assurance, many of you know Molly, she worked with AHCA for, at least 25 years or more, accepted a position as the Chief of Staff with the Department of Children and Families. So on Monday morning, Kim Smoke received the news that she was going to be Molly's replacement until another person could be selected for that position. So as you can imagine, Kim is just running around like a chicken. And so she emailed me first thing this morning and said she had been called downtown this afternoon. Her team were on various calls and that she apologized, but that she was not going to be able to join us today. One other thing too, she said that we were, sending her questions yesterday and today, and she wants to make sure that she can answer those questions. Is that right, Jason?
Yeah, I think what Kim wanted to do was for us to gather all the questions we could and give her a chance to review the questions, double check the CDC guidance, the emergency order from DEM, the FAQs they've already issued, and work with leadership so they can come back next week and provide good solid answers to all the questions we have, rather than come on today or come on tomorrow, take some questions and come back next week. So we're going to try to kind of go through everything today, gather all the questions we have. Please, I'll defer to Sandy, but please make sure you submit your questions and we'll see what we can put together so Kim can come back and give us some meaningful information for our next meeting.
So Sandy, you want to kind of go through some of the questions that we've received already, and then also let's take as many questions as we can so that we can get Kim a good list, and then she can go from there and get the answers that we need.
Absolutely. And just to remind everybody, you can submit your questions via chat and via the Q&A document or the Q&A window. As Gail mentioned, we had, I think when I compiled them at the end of last week's call, more than 100 different questions that we ended up submitting to AHCA after we kind of compiled and put the similar ones together. So we did want to go through a couple of the ones in their Q&A document. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. Give me, let's see. And while we're doing that, we're going to go ahead and check again if anyone has any questions that they would like to specifically ask us. We do have a question on the dining protocol. Can we distance less than 6 feet? Kristen, that's a great question. I'm going to pull up the information from AHCA. Hopefully you guys can see that now. And if we scroll down to social distancing, I believe they reference that. Let's see. All right, not specifically in this, but as Kim mentioned last week, they are allowing guests to eat and drink with residents, but they are still encouraging that 6 feet social distancing in coordination with the CDC guidelines. So yes, people can eat together, but they do still need to practice that 6 feet distance if they're eating together. Let's see, thank you for that question, Kristen. And I'm gonna go ahead and make sure we've got all of our Q&A up. We had many questions last week about visitation. So I'm just going to go over a couple of the main ones that we talked about. Folks asked if they needed to, if they were still required to schedule the visits, and there is not currently a requirement to schedule visits. Now, some communities may ask their visitors to continue scheduling with them to make sure that they're able to accommodate the visits, but again, there's no requirement from ACA that visits be scheduled. Similarly, there is no requirement from ACA right now, or from the state, to have any of those designated types of visitors. So the compassionate care visitor, the essential caregiver, those designations no longer exist once the executive order, the emergency order, was rolled back. And so you no longer need to ask your residents to designate those visitor types or ask the POAs to designate those visitor types. How often are we supposed to do vital signs? How often are we supposed to check vital signs? Gail or Jason, can either of you address that? I know that
Didn't Kim talk about that last week, to make sure that the screening was done with the CDC guidelines at least once a day? I know they were doing it twice a day before, but if anybody can answer that question, that'd be great. But I think Kim said just based on CDC guidance, but to
Yeah,
continue screening.
Yeah, so everybody who comes into your community must be screened. You must ask them those basic screening questions. If they're healthy, if they've been exposed to COVID, their temperature checks, those screening protocols are definitely still in place. We'll have to go back and check, and while we're going through the next few questions, I'll check at the same time to see if we did get an answer to the twice daily temperature checks. And I think that's what we had asked asked Kim last week in the call. So we can go back and check on that, and we'll circle back to that particular question. I've got another question from Maggie asking if you can print this. Yes, Maggie, you can absolutely print this. This is on our website, floridaseniorliving.org. Click on COVID resources, and then we have a whole section on visitation. We've got the most recent ACA memo that was released earlier this week, I believe. If you click on that and follow their link, yes, you can definitely get to that information. Beth Ann has asked, what if someone was on a plane in the last 14 days? And that's a good question too. Right now, it seems like there's a little bit of a conflict between CDC travel guidance and the state travel guidance. And so Kim is working on checking to see if there is any information, excuse me, that they can update for us in terms of screening protocols. So the CDC is not as worried anymore about travel screening requirements. There are still some travel screening requirements that are in the current tools that are in use in the state of Florida. Gail and Jason, I don't think we have any updated screening tools yet. So at this point, we're still relying on the tools that ACA has provided, and Kim is working on getting us clarification between those two from ACA. So Beth Ann, I'm sorry we don't have a specific answer to that question, but we will make sure we submit that to ACA in our overall list. Jason, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right, what if all parties are fully vaccinated, Bill? That's another good question. The CDC did release information for people post-vaccinations. Unfortunately, right now, there's an exception for residents and staff of long-term care facilities. So while you may be able to participate if you're fully vaccinated, participate in some of those relaxed CDC guidelines outside of an assisted living community, not just yet in a long-term care setting. So the CDC has not issued any additional guidance that we're aware of. Now, CMS has come out with some additional information, but as you guys are all very aware, CMS does not oversee or license or regulate assisted living communities. So we don't have any specifically created for us rules and regulations at this particular time.
And I was glad to hear Kim say that last week too, that we did not have to follow CMS guidelines. So that was a good thing.
Yes, very good point, because those CMS guidelines, they have some really specific requirements. And while ACA did release them in their visitation memo, that applies to the nursing home folks that are regulated by CMS and report to CMS. Assisted living communities do not have to meet those elevated guidelines and requirements that were listed in the CMS memo. We are still reporting daily in ESS. Yes, this is still a requirement. We have not.
We did ask Kim, please let us have the weekends off.
We did, yes.
They are thinking about that too.
They are, but we are still under a current public health emergency. I know it feels like things are kind of slowing down, but there is still a declared state of emergency, a public health emergency. So right now, there is still a requirement to report daily in ESS. Thanks for asking that, Michelle. We had some additional questions last week, and I can tell you what ACA is working on. Many of you asked Kim, well, if we have to social distance, what do we do if we can't necessarily limit the number of people in our communities? Are they allowed to go all over the building? What's the deal there? And Kim said that they would take a look at that. I'm going to scroll through real quick and let's see. I know that I did see some of that.
Under in-room visitation.
Well, if you in-room visitation. So if you look at visit location, can multiple visits occur at the same time? Yes, they can occur in common room as long as there is that social distancing between the groups of visitors. Now, I do want to make sure you guys know this. Visitors can hug the residents they're visiting. All right, the governor is encouraging that. However, what we don't want to have is multiple groups of visits happening in less than 6 feet apart. So if you have resident John and resident Sally each have their families in visiting, those groups of visitors need to be at least 6 feet apart. We don't want to have too much commingling. All right. And going on down to if in-room visitation cannot take place, can a visitor be allowed in a residence room to observe the state of the residence room? We want to allow folks in our residence room. Again, we want to make sure that we are respecting the residents' rights, those statutory rights. And so giving them that opportunity to have a private visit. Now, if there's a roommate if it's a non-private room or a shared room, make sure that we're keeping that and taking that into account as well. So if, it wouldn't necessarily be a great idea if both roommates also had 2 groups of visits happening at the same time. You may want to looking for a type of common area to accommodate at least one of those rooms. All right, any update on the social distance dining in the dining rooms? Not at this point that we're aware of. We are still required to maintain that 6 feet social distancing. Now, Kim mentioned last week that ACA is allowing visitors to eat and drink with guests. There's no prohibition from ACA against it. So, but there is still that 6 feet social distancing requirement, making sure that residents are 6 feet or so apart from each other in the dining rooms, things of that nature. So yes, that 6 feet social distancing requirement is still in effect.
And we hope some of this will change, because we did hear that about 96% of all the residents in every community has been vaccinated now. So that's good news. So hopefully ACA will begin to, to kind of back off some of these requirements.
We are hopeful. Yes. Yes. Let's see. Are caught up on our Q&A and our questions and our chats. A couple other questions that we saw a lot of. There's a lot of questions about quarantining, what the state's requirements are in terms of quarantining, and that's something that ACA is working on, making sure that they update that for us as well. Many of you asked last week, can children visit? Yes, children can visit now. It's a good idea though, and they did ask us, kids are in the building, make sure they've got a mask on. They still are required to screen just like anyone else coming into the building, in accordance with CDC guidance. Now, obviously, you're not going to want to put a mask on a baby. So follow that CDC guidance in terms of, safety protocols for children at a certain age. But children are allowed to visit, pets are allowed to visit, therapy pets are allowed to come in. Again, depending on your community's rules. If you're a no pet community, then you're a no pet community, but but there is no longer an ACA prohibition on animals, therapy animals, that kind of stuff. Just make sure you're practicing good hand hygiene. Pet the cat and wash your hands. It's a good idea. They also did let us know that tours are acceptable, and I think that's even in the FAQ. Yes, may a facility allow tours by prospective residents and their family members? Yes, facilities may make arrangements for a tour. And that's important, right? Because we got to make sure that our occupancy levels, that we can support getting that back up. Can facilities offer barber and salon services? Yes, make sure you're following the CDC guidance. More than one resident can receive service at the same time, and there is no prohibition against outside guests enjoying these services as well. One of the big things that changed with the elimination of that visitation emergency order is that communities are no longer required to shut down their salon services or their indoor general visitation if there's a COVID case in the building. So previously, if there was a COVID case, you had to close indoor general visitation and salon services down for 14 days. That is no longer the case. One COVID case does not shut down the building. And so that's really nice. What does it mean from Sheila? What does it mean if an in-room visit is not possible? Is that just for roommate situations? So keep in mind that this document was created for all types of long-term care facilities. And in this case, they mentioned that this may not apply to facilities designated as state mental health treatment facilities. So, so if there is a situation where, for whatever reason, an in-room visit is not permissible, it may also be, well, I guess it really wouldn't matter if the person had been exposed to COVID or not, because again, residence rights do still come into effect and they are still allowed those compassionate visits. So that's probably, Sheila, that probably just has to do with the fact that some facilities are not what we would consider our run-of-the-mill everyday ALF communities. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
And then also too, Sheila, it's up to you. If you, don't want to have in-room visits, then, that would be your decision.
All right, from Carla, I missed the beginning. Can guests eat in the dining room again and attend resident activities with a loved one? There is no prohibition on eating or drinking with residents. Visitors can do that if the facilities are allowing it, so no AHCA prohibition on that. As far as activities are concerned, no specific prohibition on that, as long as that 6 feet distance is observed. And keep in mind too, there is still the requirement for small group activities. And so if there are activities going on, what we don't necessarily want to have happen is, 6 visitors come in and really skew the attendance of that small group activity so that other residents can't participate. So that's probably something you want to talk through with the families that are interested in coming to visit, making sure that, again, we're not taking away the ability for other residents to participate in an activity because we have such an influx of visitors coming in and we're busting that number for a small group requirement. Admission quarantine of new admission versus vaccinated residents. That's another quarantining question that we did ask for clarification. Kim said that they were working on that for us, and as soon as they got it, they would give it to us. Any restrictions for singing? Do singers need to wear masks? So as far as we're aware, there is still a requirement for the appropriate PPE to be worn inside these communities. So residents need to be wearing masks, visitors need to be wearing masks, staff members need to be wearing masks, which means anyone in your community needs to be wearing masks if they're inside the community. If they're outside the community and they're the appropriate amount of distance away from your residents, that may not necessarily apply. But again, you've got to make sure that that's an outdoor activity and that they are the appropriate distance away from any of your residents and or staff members before they can take that mask off. If it's inside the community, we've not received any indication that anyone can be in a community without a mask.
Right.
It's very, very important. In the community, mask up. And that mask, I can't tell you how many times I've seen masks, people walking around with their masks. Like, no, guys, we breathe through our noses. Encourage your staff, encourage your residents, encourage your visitors. Face coverings go over your nose and your mouth. All right, so that's got to happen. Where on the website is this available? Let me show you guys real quick how to get to this from the Florida Senior Living website. Let me make sure that you guys can see this. Gail, can you see Florida Senior Living coming up on my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So at floridaseniorliving.org, you're going to scroll down to our virus resources. Once that opens up, we have a whole section. You'll see vaccine information, ESS information, and then the next one is visitation. So you're going to click on the AHCA FAQs on visitation. And if you click on this hyperlink right here, FAQs, this is the document that comes up. All right, you'll notice that on our COVID page, we have a number of different things, emergency rules. We try to keep track of executive and emergency orders related to COVID and AHCA alerts related to COVID. So if you've missed something, you might want to check our website to see if we have it. We try to keep this as up to date as possible. We don't always get every single thing, but we do try to go back and pull it in if it's something we think would be helpful to you guys. And this is available to the public, to our members and our non-members, just something to help you guys out that FSLA has put a pretty significant amount of time into maintaining and making sure that it's up to date and accurate as much as possible. So that's where you'll find that on our website. All right. All right, we're caught pretty much back up again. Visitation hours. Can communities determine their specific visitation hours? Again, we want to make sure that we're respecting residents' rights. If a visitor meets the screening criteria, residents should have the right to visit with them. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that if someone demands to have a visit at midnight, that we've got to throw open the doors, randomly. So reasonable visitation hours should be established in accordance with your licensing requirements. Okay. And if requested, we've got to make arrangements for, extended visiting hours for caregivers and out-of-town guests, etc. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that our communities are required to keep an open revolving door 24/7 for visitors all the time. That's not necessarily probably the safest thing that we want to have happening either. All right.
And for those of you who are just joining the call, ACA is not able to be on the call today due to the fact that Molly McKinstry, who's the Deputy Secretary at ACA for many years, accepted a position with the Department of Children and Families this past week. So she accepted the position on Friday. She came in on Saturday, cleaned out her desk, and no one knew that she was doing this until Monday morning. And so Kim Smoke was asked to step in while a replacement for Molly could be found. And she's assumed all of Molly's responsibilities as well as hers. So she was not able to be on the call today. She got called downtown to a meeting that was going on during session. But she did assure us that she does want to answer all of our questions. She wants to have some intelligent answers. She was afraid that when she joined us last week, that some of her responses wasn't, and it's true, they were not what we wanted them to hear, because she wasn't able to answer all of our questions. So we want to gather up as many questions as possible to send over to her, and then she promised us that she will have answers for this next week for sure.
Yes. All right, Maggie, should we continue to test visitors and essential caregivers? There is no current requirement from the state that you have to test essential caregivers or visitors before they come into your building. However, they have told us that if you require testing to come into your building, you cannot pass the cost of that testing on to the visitors. So if that is a decision that your community decides to make, that's not a requirement. You don't have to test people before they come into your building. However, if you do decide to make testing a requirement, you cannot pass the cost of the testing on to your visitors. Hopefully that clears that up. Are facilities allowed to override these rules by saying their corporate rules are more stringent? So obviously, I'm not a lawyer. Gail is not a lawyer. Jason is a lawyer, but that's why he's not saying as much.
Jason, what do you think?
So what we do want to let you guys know is that these are guidelines that ACA has given us. They have told us when requirements have eased up and when requirements are in place. A good example of this is testing, right? There is no requirement to test visitors. So if you're not testing visitors, you're not going to get in trouble. If your corporate policy says we test all visitors, there's no requirement that prohibits that from happening. There is simply the follow-up requirement that if you do test, you can't charge the visitors for those tests. You want to keep residents' rights in mind. You don't want to do anything in your corporate policies to unnecessarily restrict residents' rights, and those are in your licensing requirements and in statute. But what we're trying to do is give you as much information as possible so you know what the minimum requirements are from ACA, or if those requirements have been lifted, and then obviously you guys within the appropriate scope can make future decisions on your own. Jason, did I muddle through that? And again, not legal advice. So.
Yeah, I mean, dovetailing into that, just, Kim kind of did ask us to remind everybody, read the emergency order, read the ACA facts, read the CDC guidance. Like when you have questions, those are the three things to turn to. Those are the things you have in writing: the emergency order, the ACA facts, and the CDC guidance. So if in doubt, that should be your prime triangle of things to look at. At least until we get new information.
Is there a requirement to test staff at this time? There is no longer the state mandate for the biweekly testing. So that's not in effect any longer. If your company decides that you need to test your employees, that's a decision that you guys are free to make at this point. Sheila, is there more clarification on when this emergency order needs to go into effect? It's in effect. It went into effect on the 22nd of March. That's when it was signed. So it's here, it's real, it's happening. Clarification, we don't have it yet. Like Jason said, we have the FAQs from ACA. They're giving us more information as quickly as they can. In the absence of a specific directive, they've asked us to look at the emergency order that rescinded the previous emergency orders, to look at the ACA FAQs and look at CDC and or CMS guidance. But that emergency order is in effect.
Yeah.
Visitation restrictions have been removed.
Yeah. And Sandy, just dovetailing into that, looks like question 1 from ACA's Q&A. And this is typical, what we will see from them when they issue guidance, but they do say no additional rules or regulations are needed from the state to proceed. So kind of, the gist is take this and go forth until you hear from us again. So we'll try to get more info, but as of right now, this is it.
Yes, that is correct.
And I think they kind of left us in a lurch a little bit, with Molly leaving and Kim having to step in and having a new secretary as well. This is not good for us. So we're going to keep pressuring them to make sure that we get our questions answered as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and reminding everybody too, the emergency order came out from the Division of Emergency Management, and it doesn't sound like ACA had a lot of, if any, advance notice. And so I know a lot of us are frustrated that there isn't a lot of specific ACA guidance on this emergency order, but they're working pretty quickly. Again, this emergency order was not issued by ACA. It was issued by a completely separate state agency, and sometimes things get lost in communication. Is it perfect? No. But we're doing the best we can to help you guys bridge that gap in the meantime. And yes, Carla, in the next Q&A, we've asked them to specifically address that. Can we guarantee it? No. We've asked a couple of times though, and Kim said that was something they were taking into consideration they would be working on. Are we still checking temps and having the proper screening completed prior to entry? Yes. Make sure you're screening anyone coming into your community. You should be screening your staff members. You should be screening visitors, anybody that's coming in. Screen the mailmen if they're coming in. And that includes at a minimum asking them those COVID safety questions. Have you been exposed? Do you feel, are you sick? Are you coughing? Have you had any symptoms? And checking their temperatures. That's really super important. All right, repeat testing requirements are for staff. There is not currently a testing mandate for staff at this time. That's our understanding, correct, Gail?
Right, that's right.
All right. Is there a maximum length of time a guest can stay? Can they stay all day? Can they stay overnight? We didn't get specific clarification on overnight visits, but we also did see the any restrictions in terms of the length of visit were lifted. So while they didn't answer that specific question, they did say no more restrictions on the length of visits. So govern yourselves accordingly in that situation. Are we allowed to take our residents on community activities? How would we social distance in vehicles? Can we, or should we continue to have community activities suspended? Great question. Thank you, Lauren, for that. Community activities are fine as long as the proper CDC guidance is being observed. So for example, if you have a group of people getting together for community activity, they need to have face masks, they need to be small groups, and they need to be about 6 feet apart, right? Social distancing is still in effect. You are allowed to take your residents out of the community on trips. Social distancing in vehicles, that's a tricky one. Probably wouldn't want to stick everybody in the back of a sedan. You might need to look at other transportation options, maybe a bus, maybe a van, maybe limiting those groups only to the number of people you can safely transport on a socially distanced basis. Let's see, is it against residents' rights to continue to mandate a 14-day isolation following admission, LOA, or ACH stay for 24 hours? We don't know that yet. Or Gail,
we don't think they have to do that though, right? I think Kim said, we'll check on that for sure. I think Kim did mention that they do not have to do that, but we'll double check.
Yeah, I think there is a difference though between being in the emergency room and being admitted. I think she said that if they go to the emergency room and they come back, you don't necessarily have to isolate, but if you're admitted or you're gone for more than
Right.
24 hours, there might need to be some type of quarantine situation. So Maggie, we are trying to get some clarification on that because there is a very specific difference between just going to the hospital versus being admitted into a hospital or a SNF situation.
And all of these questions are very important. Please just keep asking because, you know, we will get your, you know, answers for you as soon as we can. So no question is a dumb question. Just keep
No, that's true.
giving us these questions so we can get them clarified for you. The more we can do, the better off we'll all be, I think.
And Maggie, thank you for that clarification. And you're right. We should have mentioned that as in terms of staff testing. So there are some requirements if your positivity rate in your county is above a certain percentage. And the department, your local county health department can help you make that determination. So if you are in a community setting where you're above that specific percentage of COVID cases, there may be some testing requirements for you. And we should have been more clear. There is no statewide regular mandate for staff testing, but there may be location-specific requirements that your local county health departments are requiring at this time. So if in doubt, that's a good idea to make sure that you follow up with your county health department. And let's see. The resident goes with family to a place with a crowd, like a concert, that wouldn't require quarantine based on screening. A great question, Lauren. We can't necessarily police everything our residents do when they're out with family. We do need to screen them when they come in. If they meet the screening questions, we do have to admit them back into the facility. If you have specific questions like that, it's not a problem to call your ACA field office or your local county health department. It's really hard to answer every specific hypothetical on this. We're doing our best, but we'll send this question to ACA, but not a bad idea to check with your county health department as well. We don't have to test residents any longer. There is no statewide mandate across the board for testing at this time. There may be specific requirements based on outbreaks in a community, your county area's positivity rate, things of that nature. I know of a few communities that when they started to see some positive numbers go up, the county health department came in and said, all right, anytime you have a positive case, you need to test X number of residents. And so they can make those requirements, but there is no longer a statewide blanket across the board mandate for testing. Am I correct, Gail?
Right.
Okay. Are hospitals and rehabs required to provide negative COVID tests prior to discharge to ALF? I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't
Gail,
think any
Jason?
of that has changed. I think they have to. Yes.
All right. Okay. Oh, this is so fun. Our local health department says to quarantine. ACA says we can't quarantine if they pass screening. Should I contact ACA? Yes. Go ahead and just contact ACA. Make sure you have the information of who you spoke to, and they'll hopefully settle that situation. But yes, anytime there's a conflict, ACA is our licensing agency. Talk to ACA. That's always a good rule of thumb.
Well,
So.
and you know, we've had this throughout the last year. There has been
No,
one
really.
conflict after another. You know, when is this going to stop?
And Maggie, I think we may have answered your question as well. We don't have to test EE or residents. If there, again, it may be a specific requirement to test based on your specific situations, but there is no blanket across the board mandate on testing. Now that again is not to say that ACA or DOH could come in and say, under these circumstances, you need to test according to these particular things. They should tell you that. And from what I understand, they are telling folks that if necessary. So hopefully that helps provide some clarification. Do we still have to do 2 temperature checks per shift for staff? Well, I don't remember the answer to that. Gail, Jason?
I don't think that's changed. No.
All right. Looks like it is still the case.
Andy, Gail has a good point. At least, you know, the DEM emergency order just rescinds the visitation emergency order with the limitation of entry in the building. So nothing, you know, didn't change anything else. So whatever you have been doing, unless like CDC guidance changes or these ACA questions change it should not, you know, it should not be affected. We're just, you know, these orders are really talking about the limitation of people who could enter the building.
That's correct. Now, that's not to say that there was an update that I might have missed in putting it on our website. That could have happened. It happens sometimes fairly regularly. And then Gail and Jason call me and say, put this on our website. But again, just going through with everybody, I'm going to walk through that one more time. So at floridaseniorliving.org, it'll come up, scroll down just a little bit. You've got our COVID-19 resources. We've tried to gather as much information as we can about the pandemic, about the state's guidance, about the ACA orders, the DEM orders, the alphabet soup orders. We've got vaccine information here, as much information as we can, anything that we know about the ESS updates, anything we know about visitation, anything we know about emergency rules, and then just general information that we've been able to kind of collect and aggregate into one place. So again, that's floridaseniorliving.org, and then click on the virus banner on our front page that looks like this. And that should help you, hopefully help you find as much information as you need. It's not a guarantee that everything that has been put out is up there. This is, we're doing the best that we can. Fortunately, our COVID liability bill passed, so we're in good shape.
Yeah, I was going
there.
to bring that up.
Yes.
So, you know, one of the things that Molly said when I talked to her yesterday, because she called me to let me know that she had left the agency, and I said I had already heard. News travels fast here in Tallahassee, but she did say how proud she was of everybody and all the work that they had done, you know, this past year. And so she was just happy that she was able to be a part of it, and that she felt like she was in a good position to leave when she did. So, you know, our numbers keep going down. You guys are outstanding. You have really, really done such a wonderful job. And, you know, we just can't thank you enough for all the work that you do on a daily basis to care for your residents. I did want to ask Jason to kind of give you an update about the governor signing the liability bill this week while we're, you know, still on the phone.
And I'm going to go ahead and say that we've answered all of our questions in chat and Q&A. If you have more, go ahead and drop them in there. We may not be able to answer them this call because we've been answering, and I'm getting slightly dry throat from talking nonstop.
But
for
you know,
40
Sandy,
minutes.
you're able to take that list of the questions that folks put in the chat in the Q&A, and then we download that and send that over to ACA. And I also have probably 10 or 12 email questions too that we'll add to that list and send them over this afternoon.
Yes. All right, so I'm going to turn this back over to Jason and Gail, and Jason will even throw your next slide up there. So once you're done with your legislative update on the COVID liability bill, we'll roll straight into this.
Thank you, Sandy.
Yes, so the legislative update, yeah, House Bill 72 passed the Senate and the House last week, passed the House last Friday, actually. And it was Monday given to the governor, and I'm looking at the history here. Signed by the governor on the 29th, so 2 days ago. So Monday, signed by the governor Monday. He had a press conference Monday afternoon. It was effective upon becoming law, so it's effective immediately. It's chapter.
What does that mean, Jason?
It's effective.
What does that mean, though, for folks that may have some lawsuits pending?
Well, if you have a lawsuit that's already been filed, your SOL, you're going to proceed under the previous law for negligence and the rules of civil procedure and evidence. If you have not had a lawsuit filed against you, and you're a healthcare provider, which would include assisted living, but and there's different standards for independent living, better standards, then you do have some benefits of if they want to go after if a resident, say, wants to sue you for getting COVID. They're going to have to show, say, gross negligence instead of negligence. And one of the most important things is you do have the ability to file or claim a affirmative defense, which is to more or less say, yes, that is true, but we did this, this, and this, which means we're not going to be liable. And the affirmative defenses, by and large, they're linked to compliance with standards and guidelines. I don't have them here in front of me, but it is in Senate Bill 72. And we did, I want to say Monday, put out a blast to pretty much the world from FSLA. And it does have links to the bill analysis and identifies the affirmative defenses. So that will be very, very helpful to our members. If you run independent living, it's gonna be even, you're going to have even stronger protections. You'll have the same protections that restaurants, movie theaters, et cetera, would have, which would mean that before somebody can really sue you, or when they first sue you, they'll have to have heightened pleadings requirements, a physician affidavit, and you'll have a much stronger pre-suit notices up front. One of the sad things about the bill is that it will more or less expire or not be applicable in about a year from now. So if a year from now we're still dealing with COVID, still dealing with lawsuits, we will have to go back to the legislature and try to reenact this bill. But for the time being, for any lawsuits that were filed more or less Monday afternoon going forward, you will have these enhanced protections. But if they were filed, a few weeks or a few months ago, you're not going to have the benefits of this. But it will apply to a lawsuit. Say it's filed tomorrow based on something that happened 6 months ago. The law is retroactive in that regard, so it will cover you then. Yeah.
Jason, we have a question in chat. What does it mean if you only have a notice of intent at this point?
I would suggest you talk to your attorney about that process.
Excellent. Thank you. But it has been signed into law, guys. It's here. It's good to go. And that would probably be something important to let your attorney know as well if you're trying to figure that piece out. If a notice of intent counts as being filed before the bill went into effect or not.
Yeah, does it, Jason? I wonder.
He just said
That's a
check
good
with counsel. We're not sure.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, the law says this act does not apply. Let me see. This act applies retroactively and prospectively. However, it does not apply in a civil action against a particular named defendant, which is commenced before the effective date of this act. So, what commences a lawsuit, a notice of intent, or actually filing with a court? I don't know, but hopefully your defense attorney will know.
Well, I hope it works out in your benefit, Bonnie, for sure. Well, Jason, you want to take us to the last slide of the day?
So this is our in case you missed it slide, which as usual has hot links to recent agency documents. You'll see the one for 329 does have the FAQs that Sandy was pointing out today. So you can find them from our website and also from our email, which will have this PowerPoint with hot links to it. And with that, Sandy or Gail, take us home.
Yep, we will keep you informed on what's going on at ACA. Talked to Kim twice today. I expect that I'll be talking to her again tomorrow. We did offer, our help in case they need it for anything. And she said that she will get back to me on a time next week. The sooner the better. She understands how important it is to get the questions answered. And she said she would make sure that that all of our questions did get answered, just to give her a couple of days. So we'll do that. But in the meantime, we will keep you informed on what's going on as well. So thank you guys for being on the call this week. And we're sorry that ACA couldn't participate, but we promise that we'll have them back as soon as we can. So you guys have a great weekend. And thank you so much. Bye-bye.